this. Where is it? Here.
Again. I feel like if you say that, you essentially lose the ability to criticize any individual actor in capitalism ever, because they're just living their capitalist life, unless they're literally doing something like illegal.
That's not true.
If you can't criticize Bezos, who the fuck can you criticize?
It's not inherently immoral to participate in these systems, but that doesn't mean you can't criticize people who do if they do something within those systems you don't like. Now, I don't have a list in front of me.
Wait, if that's the case, then what's wrong with me criticizing lefties then that don't put their money where their mouth is? In that case, why are we even talking? Then you should be totally fine with me criticizing any lefty that doesn't put their money where their mouth is.
Define putting your money where your...
Like spend their money in a way that I would consider to be more ethical than just hoarding in a savings account and getting rich off of people that are poorer than them, that are being exploited by their bosses.
The moral loading of that one. Is it true that you
used to sponsor a loot box company? Real life loot boxes. You can win all kinds of amazing prizes, wallets, headphones, tech games, real life loot boxes.
I might have done like one activation once where I gave one away for free, but I don't think I've ever done like loot box stuff.
Okay, I just saw this link with your code and everything. There
was a sponsor that I had.
That's an amazing pivot though.
Once called Loots, but that was just like you like typed in a message and it showed an ad on stream, but it wasn't like loot boxes.
Okay,
that's Loots. It's like it's not gambling, yeah. But okay.
I can look into this later. I don't know. I don't care. I think people are complicated, and I think it's okay to wait. Hold on. What was the thing I was responding to? Jeff Bezos.
It seems like you can't criticize any individual ever. Like you just have to accept that all of them are.
Do you? Okay, hold on. I don't think you should criticize a person just because they're participating in capitalism, but I think there are things that you can do while participating in capitalism to warrant criticism. Like those landlords writing op-eds about how hard it is to make ends meet when they're trying to evict their tenants. I think that's really scummy behavior.
Why is that scummy?
Wait, what?
Because in a pandemic, I think it's bad to evict people who can't pay their rent because they were laid off because of the pandemic.
What if you can't pay your mortgage because a tenant isn't paying their rent?
Exactly.
And I think the institution you should take an issue with is the tenant, but rather a government that's unwilling to pay you or to.
You don't have the ability to change.
Wait, yeah, he doesn't have the ability. Wait, I thought we were. That's crazy, bro.
The government. Why is it the responsibility of the landlord to fight the system, but it's not the responsibility of a lefty to fight the system? The landlord is just doing what he...
Wait, hold on. That equivocacy came out of nowhere. So first of all, what they were complaining about were laws passed to prevent evictions. So to begin with, they already were complaining about the government. They were complaining in the wrong direction. In both ways, they would be complaining against the government, but they were fighting to evict people rather than fighting to have the government provide for them.
Well, because it sounds like the government was changing a law specifically to make it so that you couldn't evict somebody. But I'm asking you because it sounds like the landlords are just trying to maximize their system in capitalism. They're trying to be able to evict somebody.
I don't think all types of... Wait, why do you... This is what I mean when I say I feel like you're misrepresenting me. I don't think all ways of maximizing your well-being within capitalism are equally ethical. I think there are ways to maximize your well-being which are quite unethical.
Okay, hold on, because you keep doing this thing where you ask a question in a very exasperated manner and it makes you sound rhetorically effective. So for my rhetorical effectiveness, what's happening here is you don't actually have an underlying principle that you're actually like appealing to. What you keep doing is you keep trying to make an excuse for every single thing to say like, well, here it's okay, here it's not okay, here it's okay.
Excuse for? I
Every single thing. So I have listened to every single thing you said, but when I repeat it back to you, you're getting confused because you're trying to discover these arguments in real time.
No, because you're repeating. You keep saying it. You keep saying that I've said you can never criticize an individual for their participation under capitalism, which I have never at any point in this conversation said. But you've repeated that back to me like a dozen times.
Okay, so I don't know. I don't think he, even going back over it, he overtly said it, but he absolutely did say that we can't, or that we should be criticizing the system, not the individual, several times. And so I think the implication that's what he's talking about isn't the most off-base thing in the world. That's from my perspective, though.
Okay, I'm gonna write these.
In and of itself, participation, inherently, participation is not a bad thing. You can do those things in a morally neutral or even morally beneficial way. However, you can also do it in morally negative ways.
Okay, what makes it morally negative?
I think that by my standard, a morally negative way of engaging in this behavior would be, well, there are a million out instances, but I would say that I have in my head an image of how a lefty could be a business person or a landlord, and if there are ways in which
stop.
Yeah, Mad Villain, like, yeah, a lot of people agree with this idea. We should be criticizing the systems, not the people. I do as well, generally speaking. I think that, however, like, parts of the critique of the system also does come through the critique of the people, right? So the Hassan example that I just went off on, it's not really about Hassan, because to be honest, I don't really care about Hassan specifically, right? As an individual, what I'm using Hassan as is a springboard to talk about a greater problem on the left, which is, you know, the lack of every excuse that they make to hoard their wealth. Let's just be honest. I've yet to see a single time where in which a leftist doesn't make, by and large, an excuse to be able to keep as much money as they can. That's what whether it comes to charity and shitting on Destiny for direct action, comes on shitting on people for criticizing the lavish spending or the champagne socialism. They find every excuse to be able to get themselves out of a position where they are morally culpable for the way that they spend their money. It's their money. They get to spend it the way that they want to, right? That's my big criticism. I don't really care that much about Hassan specifically. If Hassan was an outlier to the system, I would say that he is out of line and talk about how this could lead to future problems in the system and how it could lead to issues there. But as an individual, right, he is advocating for like political change. But like,
fellowship expands.
I don't know. Essentially, him as a specific one person, I don't really care. But him as a specific person does have effect on the system. So I do care as to his effect on it. Do you understand what I'm saying? If Hassan was a random nobody, right? And by random nobody, I mean like literal hermit, right? I wouldn't fucking care. Who the fuck cares? Right? That's not doing anything for the system by and large, right? I think he should hold up to his principles, but it's not really going to matter to me. Sky Fisherman, thank you for the first time sub in your primer. But the fact of the matter is he does affect systems, and that's what we're talking about. I think you have a higher level of political accountability or moral accountability when you're broadcasting a message, especially a moralized message, especially a political message, to the general audience. And I would just hope.
I need you to give me an actual answer.
Threshold.
You can participate in capitalism in a morally neutral way. That's a statement that you've made. But you said there's also negative ways you can participate. Now, besides like obviously breaking the law, what is a morally negative way? Because it sounds to me like what you go on to say, because this is where you're getting caught. I don't mean calling, I'm trying to catch you, but it's like we're running a no, wait, real quick, because you're saying that morally negative equals bad things. You're like begging the question. And then one of the examples that you gave were landlords lobbying the government and saying, hey, you need to undo this law.
People during a pandemic, yes.
Yeah. Wait, is it just the eviction now, or was it the law? Because earlier you said it wasn't the eviction that mattered. You said it was the fact that it was a law that mattered. So which one is the important thing? Is evicting someone is wrong? Because that's just living in a capitalist world. Is evicting someone?
Them writing op-eds to try to get the government to revoke laws to allow them to evict during a pandemic.
Okay.
I didn't say the thing you're saying that I said. Anyone who's watching Destiny or Vaush side, you can go back and watch.
Okay.
I feel like I'm being ascribed positions.
You're not. No, I understand that. But remember earlier? Remember that tweet?
Are you listening to me?
I am listening to you very well. My brain is working a million times. Wait, real quick. So you're upset. You're upset that landlords are lobbying the government. This was one of the statements that you made in that earlier tweet where you said all of those things were jokes. Yes.
It was that they were writing op-eds.
Lobbying the government. Go ahead.
That's not what lobbying means.
It's a form of lobbying, of course.
I'm sure there were some institutions that were doing that, but
it
yes, they
happened
were
a while
pushing
ago. It's an old one.
to regain the ability to evict unemployed people during a pandemic. I think that's bad.
Okay, which part of this is morally wrong? Immoral. What part of this is immoral? So hold on. Wait, hold on. Unemployed. We're not talking about my position. If you want after this, we can walk through everything I think, because I'll be glad to talk about it.
Walk through everything. You just keep I say a thing, and then you say, "Hold up, that's not what you said," and then you say a thing I didn't say, and then we've been repeating this for an hour.
So that's why I'm writing something.
Remember why?
Okay, so your statement is that this is bad. Landlords wanted to evict people unemployed. Wait, sorry, I put people in twice. Landlords wanted to evict unemployed people during a pandemic. Equals bad. Yes?
No, I said landlords trying to get the government to revoke laws to allow them to evict people during a pandemic. What? I think it's extra nasty if you're trying to fight against the state's effort to prevent people from dying on the streets.
Wait, what? Wait, so he'd be taking a moralized position on the law? So this is really weird. So it's okay if they're evicting people during a pandemic if the law allows them to, but it's not okay if the law doesn't allow them to and they actively trying to democratically change that law?
Which part of this is the moral wrong? So here's something I've written down for you, okay? Landlords trying to get the government to revoke laws to allow them to evict unemployed people during a pandemic. If the law wasn't there, do you think it would be morally neutral for them to evict unemployed people during a pandemic?
Let me think. If there was no law, then I think it would be morally neutral, yeah. Because we have to criticize the institutions first and foremost. It's the responsibility of the state to put placeholds on stuff like this.
Okay.
Otherwise, the natural market forces
he's taking a statist position. He has a statist position on morality. That's crazy. That's wild, dude. I think this is where they get into slavery.
would continue to evict people unabated.
Okay, so the problem isn't trying to evict unemployed people during a pandemic, because this is what you keep hamming up to be very rhetorical. You're saying unemployed people during a pandemic. But your problem,
think it's bad.
Okay, but your problem isn't the fact that they're trying to evict unemployed people during a pandemic. That action would actually be okay. Your problem is that they're trying to revoke the laws.
Well, the action would be bad, but it would be a necessary component of the way commodified land ownership
wait,
works.
No.
So that participation in capital...
You can't say that an action is bad but also morally neutral. You can't do that. You could make maybe the argument that like it's bordering on being bad while it's morally neutral, but it would be morally neutral.
Would be inherently bad.
No, that participation in capitalism would be as expected. It would be morally neutral. Everyone would be doing it. However, the action which is taking place is still bad because you're evicting unemployed people during a pandemic. So wait, hold on. Wait, okay, so I'll give you an example. Okay, let me try to think of something analogous
07,
here.
boys.
Okay. When police officers go out on the beat. And
Wait, I don't think we need an example. Can we just stick to the tenant? I don't think we need, because we're just gonna make it more confusing.
When police officers go out on the beat
Okay.
and they arrest a person for selling drugs, I think that the drug war is cringe and that this is doing harm to society and blah, blah. However, it is the job of the cop to do that thing. And if a lefty was in that position and they did that thing, whether or not they were there, the other person who could have been that cop also could have done that thing. The job institutionally is to fix the drug war, not to expect that cops just ignore every drug dealer on the street. Now, if they do that, if they choose to do that good thing, I think that's preferable. But the absence of a lefty there would still incur the morally neutral action, which is...
Sorry, curious, what would you have preferred as a solution to prevent evictions of the financial burdens of landlords in the context of the pandemic? I think a solution would be to... ease the burden of renters who are facing financial hardship during the pandemic. Meaning, if you are struggling paying rent, and you can prove that, whether it be tax statements or what have you, maybe this is too inefficient of a way, but if you could prove that you are struggling to pay rent, that you are a portion of that rent is compensated by the government. It would have to be one of the largest welfare or wealth distribution campaigns in a very long time, but I think it's one of the only ways that we can realistically do it.
Adhering to the existing law.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No. Can I sidestep and ask a question about that? Because I'm so confused. If you can be replaced for doing a particular action, does that mean that any action that you do is always going to be considered morally neutral? That action can't carry moral weight because someone else could just step in and do it regardless? So let's say, for instance, there was a let's say there's a bounty board and they pay people to assassinate kindergartners. Now, you could go and accept that job and go kill a kindergartner. Would that be morally neutral because if you don't do it, someone else is going to step in and do it instead?
No, I don't think that's an institutional role that is obligated to be filled.
What if there's an institution of bounty hunting?
I don't know enough about it. I don't think that bounty hunting works the same way cops do.
Okay, what about the institution of slavery then? We'll go to a real life world. Do you think that owning slaves then in the South, that was necessarily a morally neutral thing because it was just part of the system, and if you were gone, another slave owner would just step up?
No, I think that it's worthwhile to criticize those institutions.
Why?
The people who
No, not the institutions. Don't. Just real clear. I'm being very careful to be incredibly precise with my language. I'm asking you to do the same. Okay. I'm not talking about the institutions, and I'm not talking about how you feel. I'm asking, do you think it is morally neutral to be a slave owner? For if you weren't a slave owner, someone else would just step up and own your slaves for you. Do you think that would be morally neutral?
No, I don't. No, I don't think slave owning was like a slot thing where like if you aren't owning the slaves, then someone else steps up to own this. I don't necessarily know if it works that way.
The reason why I'm saying,
but like. The same could be said literally about a million different things. Being a cop, owning private property, all of these things could be said. Technically, it's possible Amazon never gets created if Jeff Bezos doesn't do it. It's technically possible. Is it likely? Absolutely not. Is it technically possible that a lot of these slaves wouldn't have gotten bought up had you not purchased them? It's technically possible. But especially in the earlier days when slavery was, first getting... big in the United States, it was not likely at all. Like, really at all.
Wait, hold on. The reason why I'm saying this about landlords and cops specifically is because the way those institutions work, especially with landowning, literally require that those institutions exist.
Wait, you don't think the agricultural, economic organization of the South, required slavery to exist?
Not in the same way. An individual house in a commodified housing system is either owned by an individual or what? That's it. You either own it or you rent it out to some, or a company owns it or something. But with slavery, there wasn't like...
Or the bank owns it. This is, okay, so a really good example that completely destroys his argument is there's a lot of vacant properties in ghettos that nobody will buy. The bank owns, no realtors or any of that shit, like own that. They refuse to fucking pay that shit. The bank owns these dilapidated, destroyed fucking buildings because nobody fucking wants them. Nobody fucking is willing to buy these things. He's wrong on this. If you do not buy property, there are people that may not buy that property either. So by that same stretch, because this currently exists, by that same stretch, wouldn't you apply this to the slavery argument?
Institutional slots where it's required. When you're a slave owner...
Wait, how is it not institutional? They literally have like whole laws on the books regarding like the ownership of slaves.
To a demand for slavery in a way that the housing market doesn't have. If you're a landowner and you rent a property, you can't like throw your hands up in the air and say like, no, I back out, and then like that property disappears.
Wait, I don't think that's relevant. I'm just asking because it feels to me like you're falling back on this argument. The argument that you're appealing to figure out if something is worth like condemning or not is whether or not like somebody on an individual level, is whether or not somebody else would step up to replace you. So I think it's fair to say in the South, slavery was a big institution, and if you weren't going to own...
It was a big institution, but like if you own a collection of apartment buildings, that someone has to own that. Like you can't, otherwise it turns into a Ransack tenement. Like,
yeah, sure, but if you own slaves in the South, like if we go before like the Emancipation Proclamation, if we go before like slaves are allowed to be free anywhere, black people are allowed to be free anywhere, somebody has to own those slaves. It's not like you can just set them free, right?
But the only reason slaves were brought across the Atlantic was because there was a market demand for them over here. If people didn't keep buying slaves, then they wouldn't have had the transatlantic slave trade.
Yeah, but
if people didn't keep buying property, we wouldn't have, if people didn't keep renting out property, we wouldn't have a market for renters. We'd instead have public institutions rent. This is not a comparable, like, I don't think he realizes that this can be applied to renters as well.
You don't buy it, someone else is.
Works literally requires those institutions.
But if you don't buy those slaves, somebody else will.
Not if there are fewer people buying slaves, they bring less slaves over the Atlantic.
Okay, if you're going to make that argument, then I'm going to say if there are fewer people evicting tenants, then there are fewer tenants being evicted. Or if there are fewer cops making drug busts, then there are fewer people getting arrested for doing drugs. Like that breaks your other two arguments you gave earlier.
No, it would be good to not drug bust.
No, don't do this equivocation. I'm not saying it would be good not blah blah blah. Earlier you said that the action of evicting a tenant, or the action of petitioning the government to evict a tenant, or the action of arresting somebody for drugs would be morally neutral, because if you were to stop doing it, somebody else would just step in and
petitioning the government. The whole point of the institutional critique is to get the government to implement laws that make society better. I don't think there's any justification, whether or not you're participating in the system, to fight against those laws when they're implemented.
Earlier it sounded like you were saying that like if a cop arrested people for having a bunch of weed, or if a landlord wrote an op-ed criticizing the government for a law, that these things...
Those are not comparable to me.
Oh, those aren't comparable. I'm sorry. A landlord evicting somebody or a cop arresting somebody for having weed. These two things are morally neutral, because if you weren't doing it, someone else in your system would step up and do it. And it seems to me that like if we go back far enough, 300 years ago or whatever, if you owned slaves, if you didn't own those slaves, somebody else would buy them. Slavery was a huge part of the early U.S. economy. It was how a lot of our agriculture and shit got done. That if you didn't own them, someone else did. So in that case, my question is why wouldn't being a slave owner be moral if that's your way to justify what is morally neutral?
Because if you walk away from being a cop or a landowner, somebody else will own that land, or somebody else will take that police slot. But you can free your slaves.
Does he not think that there are shortages of cops in specific areas, or surpluses even of cops in specific areas?
Well, actually, given the laws of the South, it was actually pretty difficult to free the slave. You can not buy slaves. You can just not do that. Slaves aren't a necessary component of the way that economic system worked.
Wait, are you sure about that?
Absolutely, I am. And I would challenge any history PhD to come on here and argue that slavery was as necessary and intricate a component of the Southern economy as housing commodification is to our land market and cops are to our criminal justice.
Why did the South care so much about having slaves then if they didn't need them?
Because they wanted them, but that doesn't mean that they were institutionally mandated the way our land... Okay, hold on. You do recognize that there was literally no...
So... I actually think that this completely isn't relevant, because even if I agree with this, because like a point that he could go to is, well, the white people could have done the fucking labor that the black people did, and they could have just worked together. True, but why wouldn't you say the same thing about a cop or the institutions of police officers that could just choose to not uphold the law in X, Y, or Z way? Why could you just not say that? They could choose to not uphold X, Y, and Z bad law if that's the way that we want to do it. right? Because he's going to say, like, they didn't have to do it this way. They could have just been incredibly progressive and done it like that way. Well, you could make that argument about any of these other things, right? That you could have been incredibly progressive and that being a landowner is not morally neutral, and maybe the perspective philosophy had some merit to his argument, and that maybe if we do be somebody like a landowner or a cop, we should be a little bit more moral about it. We should do our best to be able to minimize status quo nonsense and not just say it's morally neutral, but instead do things like the point he's about to make with slaves, where we should do our best to minimize the negative outcomes of having a slave or having slaves inside of our country.
Alternative to properties being rented. We need, not everyone.
You do realize that the South literally had a fucking civil war against the United States to defend slavery. Why do you think this wasn't what they felt was pretty necessary?
Wait, hold on. Do you think fighting a war for something is the same as something being institutionally necessary?
I think that it is the most institutionally necessary thing if you're willing to fight a war over it. Yeah, of course.
No, that's not what institutionally necessary means. The way
what does it mean to you?
Land markets work literally require the existence of landowners who rent properties. The fact that the South was willing to fight, people fight wars over shit all the time. That doesn't mean the thing they're fighting a war over is an institutional requirement of the way their system works.
I felt like slavery was okay, I'm sorry. I could just be totally wrong. So let me understand. So you're telling me that slavery was just a hobby or a pastime of the South? They didn't actually need it for any of their economic system?
I'm legitimately asking, are you acting in bad faith right now? Because I think more of your intelligence than this. Do you really think there's no difference at all between the two things we're talking about? I'm actually not kidding. Are you laughing right now? I'm not looking at your cam. I assume you've given up on this conversation.
I have not given up. My assumption is that slavery was an integral part to the South's economy, and that anybody in this... Wait, let me finish. Hold on, real quick. Anybody in the South would have said, like, we need slaves to make our fucking shit work. It's incredibly fucking important to us. It is so integral to our economy and our way of life and our way of being that we're...
So this is a disconnect that I believe they're having. So Destiny is talking about what the people believe is institutionally necessary and what they believe is necessary for their way of life, right? And then Vaush is trying to say it actually is institutionally necessary and that they could have, I guess, worked side by side with black people and had their economy do fine, right? That's the difference that they're trying to make. However, by this same argument, cops would not be institutionally necessary if Vaush wanted to take this, because it's not. It's not institutionally necessary for cops to do half of the things that they do in the way that he argues cops have to, right? Or morally neutral for participating in. You could be a cop and then you should do like what, perspective philosophy was trying to get through to him. You could be a cop and you could do a bunch of moral shit, really cool shit, like, not be super violent or whatever Vaush believes that, like, cops, inner hyperbole that he constantly says about cops, right? Step on black people's necks or whatever the fuck he said about that one chick that was having a panic attack, right? So, like, you could argue that they do all of that, and yeah, they could still be cops. There you go. But he didn't make that argument. He doesn't make that argument. He only made that argument for slavery because he realized he was in a specific point. Because the only reason why cops are necessary in the capacity that they are right now is because we believe that they're necessary in the capacity they are right now. The reforms and the several different things that, like, other states, even in America, have done to policing would be considered probably more moral than several of the things that we have in the vast majority of states in America. But he rejects this because it's morally neutral to just be a cop. The, I guess, average status quo way to be a cop, because that shit, I guess, just works. It's whatever because somebody else would do it.
Can fight a war to defend our...
I have no idea how to pronounce your name, but thank you for the first time sub and your primer. I've been kind of trying to avoid saying your name because I don't know how to say it. Oh, is it Mercedians? Oh, that is pretty easy. Honestly, I didn't know that's how you spelled Mercedes. But anyway, or it's like near how you spelled Mercedes. Thank you. Mercedians, thank you for the primer. But yeah, I think that I think this is going to be this is just a display of how to bastardize utilitarianism by saying the consequences of things are the same because somebody else would do it. It's not the same thing.
Was there a mandated number of slaves in the South?
A mandated number? Not by law. I'm sure economically there is, but not by law, sure. Slaves.
we had n number of slaves, and then one slave owner throws up their hands and they say, I'm fucking done owning slaves. I am.
A good example of this would be, or another example that Vaush could add, or I would wonder if Destiny could ask Vaush that is institutionally necessary, is triage. So it's a very common thing that non-white people would get a lower priority when it came to triage in the medical industry. So if you were a doctor and you had to perform triage and there was a black patient and a white patient, would he say it's morally neutral to always go with white patients because if you were not the doctor, then somebody else would always pick the white patient? I wonder if he would say that. It's institutionally necessary. Not just institutionally, it's literally like physically necessary. It's materially necessary to perform triage. However, it's not materially necessary to perform triage that way, nor is it materially necessary for you to be a landlord in the specific way that like everybody's been criticizing him for, nor is it materially necessary for you to be a cop in the exact way, and yada and so forth. And that's what the whole discussion's been about.
Going to free my 100 slaves, and now the South has n minus 100 slaves. Is there a necessary economic counterbalancing effect which requires that 100 additional slaves be purchased collectively by the South?
I remember.
Where do you think those slaves went? Somebody else would just buy them up or kill them. No. What would happen if you
think they bought them up?
What? Wait, what?
Why do you think there were so many slaves to buy up?
Because people felt like they could put them to economic use? What do you mean?
Okay, so if people stopped buying all of the slaves, there wouldn't be a market for the transatlantic slave trade.
Okay, and if people stopped renting all houses, then there would be no more
wrong.
landlords.
You have to.
No, you
That's
don't.
The thing.
What do you mean? How do you have to? You could just make everybody not rent a house. What do you mean? You don't have to do
Wait,
that.
where would they live?
No. I mean, when I say rent a house or be a landlord, or maybe I'm being unclear. I mean, like rent a house to another person. You don't have to be a landlord. You can just tell everybody to stop being landlords.
So everyone has to buy the house they live in?
Sure.
That's not possible for a wide number of reasons.
Wait, why not? If every person stopped like being landlords, the price of houses would fall eventually. Necessarily would have to. If there's not that many dollars chasing them, the prices would come down because people would have to sell eventually. Or
you
also, just another suggestion. What if everybody just gave their land to the government and turned it into government housing? That's something that you could do. It's not something that's impossible in our current system. Just be like, hey, you know what? We're not going to rent our properties out. We're going to give it all to the government so we can make government housing. I wouldn't suggest this, but this is definitely possible. All of this is possible. Vaush's idea is it's physically impossible to do anything but the status quo. Otherwise, it's because it's not institutionally viable. Like, that's just not true. All landlords could go, yeah, you know what? Fuck this shit. We're not renting to anybody, and you're going to have a bunch of fucking homeless people unless the government buys this land from us and gives it to people at fair rates. Or they literally could just charge like significantly less, like perspective philosophy is talking about. That's an alternative as well. Not just not renting, but hey, lowering the rent.
You think
to be clear, hold on. Wait. I gotta point this out. Okay, I have to point this out because I can't let you walk away with talking away. No. Because you keep saying this. So you're acting like it's ridiculous. Wait. I know. No. You made this comparison. Okay, you're asking you think that it's possible that everyone could just buy a house? You literally threw as an example to me. Well, everyone could just stop owning slaves. Okay, so no. Okay, I'm not gonna let you pretend like my comparison is so unbelievable. Okay, I'm not saying that my comparison is so unbelievable when that was your argument that you gave me. Okay, so let's be real for a second. Okay, let's be clear. Okay.
So let's be clear. If everybody
rent
just
price in a renting market because you want it,
they did. If they just stopped,
is it allowed to? Yeah, I think
the economic systems within the South, back in the antebellum South,
we don't have a vacancy tax.
There are ways in which they could accommodate those changes, because at the end of the day, a slave is just labor that you're not paying or treating very well. There are ways to change that, and we know that because they did. We fought a war and they lost, and after they lost, and there were no more slaves.
No, he's talking about after institutional change. Wait, he's saying we know that there was an alternative because they fought a war and it did change. It took institutional change there. We could say the same exact thing about renters. Renters or landlords do have something else that they could do. Same with cops have another thing that they could do. It can change. It just takes a radical change. We could say the same exact thing about landlords.
A different system was implemented and it worked
Well, and there are ways that we can accommodate the absence of all landlords, though. What do you mean?
We can't accommodate the absence of all landlords in a commodified housing system because the way the modern world works does not allow for every single property a person could be living at to be purchased.
It absolutely could be. What do you mean? The government could assign these houses to people?
Hold on. If that's the case, if we're talking about the government assigning houses, then I would agree.
How is that different than the government going south and murdering, or not murdering, but fighting a fucking war with another fucking country to get them to stop being slave owners?
What does that have to do with war? The government.
Wait, hold on. Just to be clear, hold on. I'm gonna have to talk over you if you're gonna keep talking over me. I'm sorry, because I have to get this because you're trying to do the rhetorical thing. Okay? You're trying to make it sound like it is so unbelievable. You're trying to make it sound like it is so unbelievable that the government could assign houses to people that's just unreasonable for me to ask. But the counterexample that you're holding up is that in order to make people stop being slave owners, they fucking had a war over it. So yeah, if you're gonna say.
Your willingness to fight a war over something is not a direct indicator of how institutionally necessary it was.
It's an indicator of how institutionally necessary they thought it was.
How they thought it was. Germany fought a war over Lebensraum, but they lost the war and they have their current borders. And look at that, Germany still exists.
And you know what? Clearly, I bet. You know what? I don't think it would work that well economically, but I bet we could decommodify all housing and have it assigned to the government. And that would probably work too.
If we did that, then I would adopt your position. If there was a push to decommodify housing or to allow government assignment of housing, then I would change my position and say that it would be unethical to be a landlord, period. Because in doing so, you would be fighting against an institutional...
Isn't he the one that's supposed to be pushing for that? Wait, what? Isn't he the one that's supposed to be pushing for that? What the fuck? Wait, that's my response, dude. I have no desire to decommodify housing. That's why I'm not saying this dumbass shit. Isn't he the one that's supposed to be pushing for that? I can't... Dude, that's wild, bro. This was more wild than I thought it was, dude.
Move to decommodify housing.
Okay, let's assume then, because we're not going to do this, let's assume that there was a country or a state mandated 1 million slave minimum, and you owned the millionth slave. Do you think at that point then that it's morally neutral for you to own that slave because if you stopped, somebody else would just step up and they would own that slave instead if it was a mandated minimum number of slaves?
This feels like a bad faith clip moment, but yeah, I think that would be morally neutral. Yeah.
Okay, that's all I'm trying to figure out.
If there's literally a mandated amount, and so it has to go.
Then if you're the one that owns the slave, it's morally neutral. Okay, that's all. Okay, that's fine. Because now that's consistent. Okay. So now, going back then. Okay. So I'm going to. So you do agree with this statement? Okay.
Respect to him for at least trying to
treat the slave well. I think that would be nice.
Okay, but it would still be morally neutral. That's all we care about. Okay. You believe that if you can be replaced in an institution, then any action that you do within that institution is necessarily morally neutral.
Oh god.
So long as you can be
replaced within an institution that any action, no, not any action, as long as you're acting the median, as long as what you're doing what's expected, you can do worse or better. You're talking about an incredibly complicated a collection of thresholds. I don't know if you're looking for like a price line.
Couldn't he then say that I don't know if they want to take it to the level, but couldn't he then say that like Auschwitz camp guards are like morally neutral?
Or if you're looking for an itemized list of good and bad behaviors, I don't know why you're laughing. I'm trying to answer this.
No, because you're like, because do you think? Here's the thing. Listen, when you're trying to figure out like a position or a stance on something, when you have to add 50 million asterisks behind it, you're adding so many different like qualifiers and exceptions and rules.
What qualifiers?
Well, you just told me that there's like a number of thresholds along which you can figure out if acting within an institution is even moral or not.
You know why? Because that way, the presence of the lefty there doesn't bolster the institution. If another person was in their place, nothing would change.
Okay, so that's fine. But even if there's a lefty, they're treating his slave poorly. It's not going to change anything if somebody else replaces him.
Well, it's absolutely changing something for the slave, dude.
Okay, then in that case, it's not enough to just act normal. Because if you want to say that it's not enough to do that because the slave's being treated horrible, what we should actually get is like a benevolent slave owner or a great slave owner. Okay, I could agree with that, but that means then being a normal lefty business owner is not good. You need to go above and beyond. So earlier when I gave the example of charging market rates for your rent, it's not enough to charge market rates. You need to go above and beyond and charge under market rates. Which one is it?
Assuming right now. I think. Well,
I'm not assuming anything. I'm giving you the logical contradictions between your statements.
Every time people have asked me this, I do say you should charge below market rates. Are you trying to ask me what percentage below or above?
I'm not asking you anything even remotely that specific. I'm just trying to figure out what underlying principle. I don't think I've been
inconsistent. You've spent an hour probing a set of beliefs that I haven't wavered on in the slightest. I don't know why this is so confusing or interesting to you.
I don't
even know why we're talking about this.
The arguments that he's using are incredibly like he's dancing around them rhetorically. Like I think it'd be good if they did that. He doesn't. What he means is I think it would be better if they did that, but they don't have to do that. But he's using words like should. He's using words like good or bad or shouldn't, but isn't using them in their proper moral context if you're going to have these kinds of discussions.
We agreed on
in
the base
order
ideas.
to get points.
We agree that if you're a lefty and you have access to means, that it is good to do what you can to advocate for your political positions. If a person chooses not to do that, I think it's unfortunate, but at the end of the day, at least they're making good content on YouTube. Or bad content if it's you, because you don't like the same stuff that I like, I imagine. And if they do especially bad stuff with the power they accrue through their wealth, then I think that's bad, and you would think that's bad because you don't like bad things. I don't know why this is so disagreeable. If you want, if I don't really think it's, I don't think about it for a very long time.
Well, so my disagreement would be that I think that if somebody has, we can forget everything we just said, move to the next stage. I still don't know what you think in the prior stage, so it might come up again.
What curiosity do you have?
I don't know what you think is good or bad in terms of how you can act in society, but maybe that's not important. The next part of the conversation.
Can I ask you a really quick question? Okay, hold on. Can I ask you a quick thing? Okay. Do you...
half of my chat are Vaush fans and half of my chat are Destiny fans, and so they both tell me to talk to you for different reasons.
Got a lot of based followers, it sounds like, because it's funny because Vaush and Destiny are like have their like,
who the fuck is this?
Little love-hate relationship, but then it's like, I literally love both of them.
Avalon.
So I'm just on the sidelines. I'm like, I respect
saying,
Vaush. I appreciate his rhetoric. I appreciate Destiny. I think that he has really good arguments, and I like the way that he like reasons through things. I honestly like both of them for different reasons, and usually when I debate, I end up sort of taking a little bit from both of them almost, which I try to take the better elements, but
yeah, no, I agree. I think that I agree with Destiny more times than I agree with Vaush, but I think that Vaush's way of speaking is fucking fantastic. I wish I had that kind of rhetorical skill, but
right. I know, it's funny. I've noticed that like even if he's talking about something like somewhat mild or mundane or whatever, I just find myself like very engrossed in like what he's saying. Like almost like there are times I'm just listening to like every word he's saying, like kind of like, all right, where's he going with this? I'm interested. It just, he has a way of delivering what he's saying that like maximizes making it sound interesting. I don't know. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think so too.
But I would agree with you too that I don't know. I think that like I do agree with Destiny ultimately on like the social democracy side of things. I'm definitely way more with Destiny there than I am on like the commie side of shit.
Yeah.
Like I'm overwhelmingly on Destiny's side with his like anti-lefty.
Is Vaush even a commie? I thought it was just
I've been getting majorly lib-pilled. I hate to say it. Half of my chat are
majorly lib-pilled, huh? Nice. Based.
Do you think... Okay, wait, hold on. That's going to be me. Do you think child slavery is good or bad?
Do I think child slavery is good or bad? Well, if there's so many ways that we could define this, does going to school count as a slave? In general, I think child slavery is probably bad.
I'm not trying, it's not a gotcha.
Okay, I would say child slavery is probably bad, yeah.
Okay, I agree that child slavery is bad. I'm glad we agree on that.
That's good.
Now, there are more slaves around on Earth today than there have been at any other point in human history. They're all over the world. And the supply lines that we get our stuff from, it relies on child slavery. So I think that it's bad that those things happen. That when I buy a thing, when I buy a computer or an iPhone or something, I look at that and it's like, fuck.
Oh no, he's doing the example. He's doing the Hassan House example.
Like, this came from a sweatshop or something, or like something, misfortune touched this item at some point along the line. Is that a feeling you get? Do you ever think like it would be a better world if that wasn't the case? If I could rely on fair market treatment for everything that I buy?
For sure.
Okay, I completely agree with that. And institutionally, you think we should push for fair labor rights all around the world to the extent that we can?
Okay.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so.
But you think it's probably okay for people to like buy an iPhone?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, that's the general vibe that I get here. I think that these institutions are generally harmful and should be institutionally opposed.
And then he extrapolates that to a place where it doesn't belong. So, like, the people that run the... I mean, we can literally do it this way. We can do the inverse, I guess. Is the people that run the child slavery factories being morally neutral, having, like, the asbestos and fucking shit like that blind and fucking... The asbestos, to my knowledge, doesn't blind you, but... fuck you up in the fiberglass or whatever inside of the air fucking filling their lungs is like not that big of a deal, and they're morally neutral because somebody else would do it. Like, That's the relation that we're talking about. Like, you don't really have a choice when it comes to some of these things, some of these products, right? You don't have a choice, unless we're talking about like shirts and stuff like that. Even phones, I actually think you might be able to have some choice in. So if you make enough money, you should absolutely make a different choice. But I don't know why he's relating this to the previous example.
Okay, I understand this. Let me ask you this question, okay? Mm-hmm. Do you agree that buying an iPhone that might have been made by a slave at some point, that's an unfortunate thing that we should try to avoid, right?
I don't.
This isn't a trick question. It's just
the person for getting an iPhone.
Sure, but like if we could avoid it, it'd be nice to avoid it. It's like, yeah, sure. Yeah. Do you think that carries the same moral weight as locking a slave in your basement and forcing that child to build you an iPhone? Do you think these two things are the same, or do you think that it's a little bit different, that one is worse than the other?
I think those are different.
Okay, that's my issue. My issue isn't that a lefty merely exists in a system where maybe he buys something from a child slave. My issue is when they have the slave in the other room working for them. And then when you say, well, hold on, dude, isn't that kind of crazy? You're like, whoa, bro, you've bought iPhones that are touched by slaves as well. It's the same thing. That's my problem. Okay. My issue isn't that lefties just exist in a capitalist society and are just, you can't help it. My issue is that there are things that you can help. You could pay workers a lot of money. You could advocate for certain causes. You could put your money where your mouth is for some things, but you choose not to.
From my perspective, what is unethical about a lefty owning a business?
A lefty owning a business by default isn't unethical, but if they own the business and they run it like any other capitalist, why wouldn't you?
Okay, owns a business and has wage slave employees. Okay, what about that?
I think that's unethical. I think that if you own a business, it should be a co-op, and you should be using your money to put up to prove the concept and to run it in a moral way. If you believe that exploitation of workers, that paying a wage and collecting a profit off of your employees is necessarily bad, you should have a rev share, profit share, employee stock program to negate that from happening. You shouldn't be collecting. I agree.
That is a thing you should do. But again,
no. Hold on. Wait. I'm not using the vocabulary here. Okay, I'm in Destiny world. I'm saying that it would be unethical.
Wait, it actually.
Hold on. Wait. I'm not using the vocabulary here.
Vocabulary. What the fuck? It actually got pretty close to the word.
Okay, I'm in Destiny world. I'm saying that it would be unethical. Not I wouldn't like it or I'd prefer it. I'm saying it would be unethical, in my opinion. If you're a leftist, it would be unethical to run a business where you are a capitalist extracting surplus labor. That would be unethical. Not I wouldn't like it or I would prefer not. I say it would be unethical, and I think it would be ethical. It'd be morally righteous for you to run a business in a way that complies or comports with the ethical system that you have.
Who is the recipient of the harm?
For what?
For that example.
If you run a business, the recipient of the harm would be the workers, the laborers.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't start a business, where would they be working?
I don't know, somewhere else.
Somewhere else. And if you started a business and they had an opportunity to work at your place or another, and they chose yours when they could have had another, what would your absence have meant to them?
The absence would have meant that you weren't the one committing the immoral action.
So there's no actual change in the harm done to the world. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
But that doesn't matter, though.
It is the only thing that matters to me.
If you were out in a crowded area, no, you don't even agree with this.
Wait, stop. Just if your participation in these systems, and let's be perfectly clear here, okay? The crime of capitalism is not that there are businesses that are...
He's literally saying you have no moral obligation to fall in line with anything that isn't status quo. Because it's status quo. He's just like a fucking statist when it comes to morals. That's all it is. It's like, hey... Or more specifically, he's status quo when it comes to morals. Hey, is that status quo to be able to, like, eat fucking children? Yeah, sure. So, like, well, listen, if you eat kids, that's fine. Like, that's what he's doing. He's doing the ultimate meme.
Privately owned. The crime is that there is nothing.
As long as it's status quo,
whether or not
it's
a
fine.
lefty chooses to open a business has no bearing on the existence of capitalism, and it also does nothing but, this may sound like a capitalist argument, but I do believe this, expand the opportunities for workers in the region because they have N+1 places to potentially work at now, furthering their opportunities and potentially giving them a better shot.
Okay, let's say
of a business only adds utility; it doesn't derive it. Whether or not you're a lefty.
The problem is you committing the action that you deem immoral. You can't use the system as an excuse.
I don't think that's immoral.
Okay, fine. So here's a question. You enter a shady business, okay? Let's say that there is a woman, she's locked in a fucking cage, and it says not going to be freed until she's raped. You know that no matter what happens, somebody has to rape that woman in order for her to get freed. It doesn't matter if you do it or someone else does it.
I'm not going to dignify these hypotheticals.
Oh no.
Because so with your moral system, whether or not you do the immoral act, oh, you know what? Just because it's you, we'll go for a toned down one. Let's say that you walk across somebody's car, and let's say that on their car seat, you see that their window is down and their wallet's laying on their car seat. If you steal that wallet, are you just as like okay to do it as anyone else because anybody else could walk by and steal the wallet? Like, is it okay for you to do it because someone else will steal it if you don't?
Do you think those are comparable?
Yes. It's the exact same thing. There is a wallet on a seat in a car. You walk by, the window's down. If you don't
To be fair, it's not the exact same thing as the rape one, because the rape one, somebody has to rape that person. And this one, in theory, nobody has to take the wallet, so it's not a perfect, somebody's going to take that fucking wallet. But in theory, not everybody, there is not a reality where somebody has to take the wallet, but yeah. I think the rape analogy would have caught him, but yeah, don't they go back to it or something? I don't remember.
Steal it. Someone else is going to steal it. Do you think that you might as well steal it because
nobody has to hire the employees? That is correct as well. Win. That's the right response to the statement that I made. Yeah, that's a good one.
And giving wage slaves the opportunity to work.
It just is made to progress the conversation forward.
Compelling no one, coercing no one, only implicitly through capitalism.
She could be in the cage forever. I guess that's in theory true as well.
You're giving the most based libertarian anarcho-capitalist takes right now. When I open a business, I don't force anyone to work for me. They do it by their own volition. You know that's not true. And in capitalism, you have no choice but to work or you die. What do you mean?
That's why I said, except for the implicit coercion of capitalism in a market system. What's the point of me qualifying?
Okay, maybe I missed it. I'm sorry. It feels like you're giving like ANCAP takes on like running a business. Well, if I don't own the business, like, do you hate the global poor? Like, don't you want to give them an opportunity to work somewhere? Like.
You acknowledge that my argument, that what I'm saying doesn't contribute harm to the world, the net utility only increases.
My problem is that if you have an actor with a specific ethical system, I think that it would be morally wrong not to act in congruence with it. So what I'm saying is, so in your world, it sounds like anybody walking by the car, you might as well take the wallet because any other person would be. But what I would say is, you shouldn't take the wallet.
Wait,
you could just what? You could just not? Wait, what?
Yeah.
You could just not take the wallet?
The wallet?
In that case, you could just not open the business.
Well, then where are people going to work?
And another person will open the business. You don't have to.
What difference does that make?
So then what difference does it make if you take the wallet?
People need jobs.
I was going to say.
That's not relevant here. We're not talking about the particular thing if it's needed or not. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking
about. In fact, in the wallet example, you can make the argument that you taking the wallet would be more ethical because of the low rate of socialists inside of the country, especially the low rate of socialists willing to steal. Because who would have thought some socialists actually have, some kind of backbone when it comes to stealing. But anyway. The low rate of socialists willing to steal a wallet, and so you could, spend that money on your favorite stream daddy because you think he's going to enact socialism, and you're doing praxis by giving him money. I don't know. Whatever the fuck, slacktivists are thinking is a good idea these days.
From stealing the wallet, nobody steals the wallet and everything is fine. If nobody opens a business, there are no jobs, and capitalism doesn't exist, and we all starve.
Okay, if there's $100 bill on the floor, somebody's going to take it. You're saying that if somebody else walks by and takes it, because your arguments earlier was, does the net harm or the net good in the world change? Well, if not, then it doesn't fucking matter. That's what you said.
Picks up the $100 bill, everything remains fine. But if nobody opens a business, we don't have an economy, and we all go back to trading rocks.
Wait, then why don't you use the same argument then for the cop? If the cop shouldn't arrest.
So I think Destiny's letting him get away with this. Destiny isn't saying nobody opens a business. What he's saying is, and I totally think Destiny dropped the ball here. He's not saying that you shouldn't open a business, that if you open a business, you should make it a co-op, right? So what Vaush is saying is true. If nobody opened a business, the society would collapse. However, if everybody opened up co-ops, society would also collapse because socialism is cringe. All right? But, he doesn't believe that, right? He doesn't believe that. But yeah, anyway, there it is.
The person for smoking weed because maybe just no cops could arrest somebody for smoking weed.
Wait, that's not the same. You're conflating good.
No, I'm not conflating.
Wait, hold on. You conflated two things there. You did, and you'll recognize it if you give me a second. There's a difference between expecting everybody to act very well within an institution and abstaining from participating in that institution altogether.
Wrong.
And the analogies that we're providing, not opening a business and not taking the $100 bill off the ground, or abstaining entirely. Whereas you just said, what if every cop just did really good in their job? I think that'd be fantastic.
Okay, I'm going to give you this analogy from all three
co-ops
perspectives.
might work. Has it ever been No, so I was being a bit hyperbolic. Co-ops might be able to work. They will never work if we just decide to throw them out there institutionally and just go for it. That's never going to work. They need so much protections, legally, rules, guidelines before that's even close to being a thing when we're talking about the complete universal change of all markets. If you just want to open up a co-op, that's not going to shut down anything. Honestly, there's some co-ops that work. Godspeed, try it. Fingers crossed. Hey, listen, I'm here with you. I'm a SOCDEM. I'm for mixed economy shit. I'm not saying any co-op will fail. But if we try and institute all businesses being co-ops tomorrow, yeah, that shit would crumble faster than, I don't know, fucking... The memes are too
and it
spicy.
lines up with everyone.
Some memes are too spicy.
I would say that all three of these actions we can say are immoral, okay? It can be one, arresting somebody for having marijuana is immoral because you are acting in a way that I think is shitty if you're like a socialist or a moral person, even if you're in that system. I think it's bad. So one is arresting somebody for weed, okay? Fuck you. You have a discretion. You have discretion as a cop. You don't have to do that, okay? Number two, stealing somebody's wallet. You don't have to steal their wallet. Even if someone else can steal it, fuck it. Don't do it. That's bad, okay? And then three, opening a business and exploiting your workers by collecting wage slaves. You don't have to do that either, okay? That's wrong if you're a socialist, okay? All three of those are wrong. Now, that's on all three levels, that's wrong, morally wrong. Now, morally neutral, okay?
Not in September,
I guess morally
really?
neutral would be
Why?
the cop,
Okay.
I guess, meeting his quota if he has to arrest somebody because a friend like radioed it in, okay? Fine, that's morally neutral. You're existing in a way you have to exist in the system, okay? For the lefty, I can't think of a morally neutral way to open a business. I guess maybe you just don't open a business. You just don't do anything. And you let somebody else step by and open a business. Or actually, I'm sorry. We'll say the cop doesn't arrest somebody. Maybe somebody else steps by. He never
the
becomes a
co-op,
cop.
no?
Okay. Or for the lefty
Wait,
never opens a business. And then, or for the wallet guy like
what about the co-op? Is he missing the plot? Wait, what's immoral about opening a co-op as a lefty?
never steals the wallet. He never walks by, never takes the wallet. He just does nothing or whatever. But then on the ethically, like,
oh, sorry, for him, for. I think I understand what he's at with
high
this.
side, like these would be good things to do on all three levels. The cop could like not only
morally neutral. I'm sorry, I lost the plot.
the cop not arrest somebody or not
I
be a
lost
cop.
the plot.
The cop
I
could
lost
tell
the
somebody like,
plot.
hey,
I lost
throw
the
that
plot.
away. Like there are other
I'm
cops
sorry.
who come by, right? He could try to help people that are drugs. Like, hey, like go check in somewhere, do something good as a cop, right? Or two, the lefty business owner could open a co-op. He could open a business and say, hey, we're actually going to do rev sharing. If you work here during rush hour, you're going to pay like $6 an hour more because we're making more money. Or for the guy that sees the wallet, the guy could go into the car, take the wallet, and then find the owner and say like, hey, dude, your car was open. Here's the wallet. Like this is all three levels of like moral action. So you could either act morally wrong, or you could disengage from the system completely, or you could act morally right. I think that I can encourage people to act morally righteous. I don't think it's fair to say, well, if he doesn't open a business and act in a bad way, someone else would just open the business. No, he could open the business and act in a good way. If these are truly what his ethics are, you could do that.
Yes, that would be good.
Yes, but the neutral, the disengagement thing, if you have principles, I don't think that's good. I think that's bad.
Because if he didn't, the other survivor would, so it's morally neutral.
True.
If you walk by a car and if
Vaush is just blackpilling me. If I landed on Coconut Island, I would rush to get coconuts just to avoid somebody like a socialist who watches Vaush from getting the coconuts. Because God knows, dude, there's gonna be a lot of blowjobs on that fucking island because somebody else would have done it if he didn't get it, dude. Oh my God, dude, fuck that shit, dude. That is a sprawl, dude.
If you walk by the car,
assumption that the neutral option for a lefty opening a business would be to not open that business, which I obviously disagree with. I'm sorry, if there's some irreconcilable difference that we're not going to resolve here, then we might as well not waste an additional hour on it. If you acknowledge that when a lefty opens a business and let's say pays market rate same as everyone else and the workers are treated fine, really middle of the road, as hard as that is to abstract, all you are doing in a purely empirical sense is giving local workers an additional choice, an additional place that they could sell their labor to. An unethical institution, unfortunate, but you're not compelling or mandating or directing any direct harm. If you didn't do that, there would be no benefit to
but
the
if
world.
you have the means to not, if you have the means to act in a way that's in more accordance, if you have the means to act in harmony with your principles, then for you to do less.
I genuinely think that your perspective on this issue has been tainted or corroded in some way by the people that you've argued online.
If it's been tainted or corroded by anything, it's by the fact that I went to a Jesuit high school, and what part of what we taught, I guess, was like that you should live your principles. That maybe that's the corrosion here.
Yes, but the difference is you weren't accurately describing my principles.
Well, your principles is that as long as someone else is going to step up and fuck somebody over, you might as well do it yourself. It's not bad to do it.
It's done
by fucking somebody over because someone else could just do it. Yes, there is harm. It is necessarily exploitative to have wage slaves. That is harmful.
The system is exploitative. Even if they're not working at your place, they'll work at another one.
But if you are participating and encouraging and furthering that system by owning a business and exploit that interaction.
By the way, a little bit of history about me as a person. I was somebody that used to be a socialist, more specifically a communist. And unironically, the thing that made me not a communist and a socialist was looking at other communists and socialists.
Destiny advocated for communism in this debate.
True. And I have never been happier with my choice of no longer being a socialist, no longer being specifically a communist, but both, I mean, still a socialist. But I have never been happier with my choice than like looking at the absolute sludge that is all popular socialists online. Excuses for champagne socialism, excuses for not living up to your principles, excuses for not paying people that do labor for you, It's true. My younger self is weeping. Okay, weeping. But I don't give a fuck, dude. I jumped ship at the right time, boy. I sold when it was at a high, all right? And I'm just watching the stock crash, dude. Crash, dude. I'm just, I did not have diamond hands that day, and I am happy.
Is necessarily
Stop being a utilitarian.
It's not a. It's
no. All of the arguments that you've been making have rung deontological to me. If that's your dig, that's fine. But your understanding of what I think is hypocritical or what I think is wrong or incorrect is just not the case. Maybe a lot of other lefties would agree. Maybe a lot of other lefties would say, yeah, owning a business as a lefty is hypocritical. And if that's the case, you can roast the fuck out of them.
If you have the means to do something more in harmony with your ethical principles,
so
then that, as a utilitarian, that's what we should be encouraging everybody to do.
But what is the difference between the obligatory good and the supererogatory? What must one do to avoid being bad, or what is simply good to do voluntarily? Nobody donates all of their income.
No, come on, don't fucking throw some dog shit argument at me.
Please go.
Oh my God, he's bringing out the dog shit arguments.
What dog shit arguments?
I never said you have to donate all of your fucking income.
I never said you said it. I was trying to provide an example. Everybody believes. Well,
he's bringing
not
him
everyone.
out.
Most people believe that you should give to the needy or the poor or the homeless. And very often people give a couple of dollars to a busker outside of their work, but very few people.
Yeah, so I think the obligatory action is that if you have the ability to work, to live in accordance with your principles, the moral principles that you espouse, that you have to do that. You ought to do that, otherwise you are immoral as a... And like maybe this is the disconnect when he says, well, yeah, you could agree that you're doing something immoral, but that's just hypocrisy and who really cares? Well, the reason why I care personally is because if I'm saying something is immoral, like I only consider hypocrisy to be a soft criticism if you have no other option. If you are truly like being hypocritical and what have you, if you're hypocritical and you have options to be able to not be hypocritical, obviously depending on the like level with which you hold that moral belief or that moral condemnation, it should be more important. So like, for instance, if I kind of just think orange is like my favorite color, but like somebody asks me and I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to say green or some shit. Like, who really cares? It's not really that big of a deal. But what if you're saying and your entire broadcast is making fun of, ridiculing, ruling class, capitalist class people for like, exploiting workers and how they're destroying their lives and it's wage theft and that they're pieces of shit for doing it and the system is trash and the system is corrupt and shit like that. And that's been in line with all of your rhetoric. And then as soon as push comes to shove, you open up a business and you run it as a traditionally run business, you're a piece of shit. Okay? You're just a piece of shit. That wasn't a light criticism. You were throwing these people under a fucking bus that was hidden under a train with a Boeing fucking 737 flying directly at it full of TNT. Okay? That's what you were doing, and then you fucking slid under there at the last second, hoping that Jeff Bezos' mound of cash would cushion the impact. Okay? That's what you were doing. Fuck you, and fuck that shit. You're a piece of garbage.
Penny, donate everything. So somewhere between A and B, there's a line. Now, I personally think that we don't have an institutional obligation to provide any given amount to charity, but I think it's good when people decide to do that. As a lefty, I don't think you have any moral obligations apart from the expectations that I would assign other people. It is, to me, additive. It is a benefit. It is an extra good if they use their platform, their power, their voice to advocate for lefty.
Either.
So it never existed?
Never existed. And so where's your proof that it exists?
Well, let me just ask you, was the Klan racist, the Ku Klux Klan, or no?
Give me that.
At some point, they became evil.
Mike from
racist.
PA cosplay.
In the 1960s either.
So it never...
The fucking manner. You could clearly tell that they were trying to not fucking screw up that couch.
I mean, it's one I advocate for quite a bit because obviously I want to win, but I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's a moral wrong for a person to believe a thing, but not dedicate their life to, or even a substantial number of their resources to advocating for that thing. I don't think that's a moral wrong, and I don't think it's hypocritical to open a business. And no matter how many times you try to cram hypocrisy down my throat, I stand by it.
I'm just trying. Okay,
You
here's
have
a question.
misrepresented my positions multiple
Dude,
times.
I'm
over the
trying to write
conversation.
down what you're saying every time, and it's fucking like morphing in front of me. Okay.
What have I morphed on?
In terms of like, we can go back in the debate. Hold on. I want to ask you a question.
Do we
okay?
need to go back?
No. I'm avoiding going back.
This doesn't look. This does not look good from Destiny, but hopefully he brings that shit back. That was looking a bit weak. Okay, that did not look good rhetorically at all.
By not saying what I think you've changed on, because then it's going to cost you back. I have a simple question for you. Okay, let's say that there are 10 people. Okay, they're gathered on the beach, and unfortunately today there's a lost soul. Okay, he's 100 meters out. This guy is fucked, and none of the people on the beach, they're not good enough swimmers to go get him. Okay. Now, let's say another guy walks by, okay? This guy is called Chad Marks, okay? Some people call him Charles Marks, okay? This guy is a fucking state champion swimmer. And he walks by and he sees that kid out there. Do you think that that guy, with his additional means, with all that he has available to him, do you think that it would be just as morally neutral for him to stand by and watch that person drown as the other 10 less capable people on that beach? Could he simply say, I mean, I don't have like an obligation. It'd be really good if I did, but like, I mean, I could just sit here and watch it happen. I don't think it's bad. It's just morally neutral if I sit here and watch him. If he has the means,
I don't
otherwise.
think these are analogous.
No, okay.
They should go out and save the person.
Okay. Why is that disanalogous?
Okay. Because if they decided not to do that thing, if they decided to abstain, it would cost a person their life. Whereas in the case of a lefty opening a business, their decision to open it would not add any negative utility to the world. So
I mean, if you pair it with the co-op, it would.
It's either you abstain and you have nothing.
You pair it with the co-op,
or you participate and you have nothing, assuming you don't do extra bad or extra good.
Okay, that's not really material to the.
That's swimmer. If they abstain, you have a death, and if they participate, you have a
that's not at all material to
participation and abstinence in these two examples meant very different outcomes.
Well, participation in a morally righteous way, in the swimming one, could result in saving somebody's life. Participation in a righteous way, in the economic sense, could be you opening a business that improves the material conditions of multiple other workers and families. I think those are comparable.
Wait, I did?
Okay. Abstinence, in one sense, is you just stand by and you watch.
Thank you for telling me. I didn't realize I did. Thank you.
Abstinence, in the business sense, is you just stand by and you watch another business open up and exploit workers.
Which would be neutral, but the death is negative.
How is that? Okay, I never ever want you to say again that like capitalism is negative or business owners are bad because you
understand my argument enough to.
I guess not, because you've bit the neutral bullet on basically every single actor in a capitalist system. So wait, let me just clarify this. You believe that any person that opens a business and pays market wages to somebody, all of that capitalist that opens a business, that person is morally neutral. They're not committing a wrong at all, even if they have the means to do otherwise.
What do you mean the means to do otherwise?
Like, say they're very wealthy, or they could run their business in another way. But let's say they choose the most exploitative option where they're just paying wages, no stock options, something like that. But it's like normal, what other like shitty fucking companies do.
So, I don't know what you mean by most exploitative. If they just open up like a regular like place, then I think that would be preferable to them hoarding their wealth, if anything. At least that would give other people jobs.
Okay.
I mean, I still think the system would be negative, of course, but. Now, if they were especially exploitative with how they managed that business, like they paid like below market wages, or they union busted, that's a big no-no. Or they.
So I think we proved our point. So the whole point of this stream, the whole point of it was I got really, really mad. Okay, I was big mad, some might say, big anger about the idea that everybody that was coming to the conclusion that Vaush was somebody that was okay with telling lies or was okay with people who do not believe in a certain position, perpetuating that position is like not that big of a deal, right? And part of that was by and large at the beginning of the fucking video. Most of what we watched in this video was him trying to address how you can like completely not live in accordance with your principles, but also not be a really bad person, which doesn't make any sense. So just a summary of how I view this situation is I kind of view it in the idea of like informational hazards when it comes to living your life, right? Kind of like that. What I mean by informational hazards is these things will restrict your ability to autonomously live your life based on you knowing them. And what they are is like, hey, saying the N-word can be pretty racist. Saying, racial slurs can be pretty racist. Things like this, because now you have less things that you are able to do with knowingly being racist, right? And compare this to like a kid who doesn't know this. If you're a kid who doesn't know saying the N-word is bad, you say the N-word, not that big of a deal. Not that big of a deal. You didn't know it. It's not that big of a deal. However, right? However, Vaush would say, well, the end result is the same, so who cares? No, we have to take into people's knowledge of what actions that they are committing to in order to be able to cast judgment primarily over that individual. All right? So it's not that big of a deal. However, when you get more information and you realize that it's something racist to say, and then you say it, then now, well, that's a pretty fucked up thing to do. The same thing applies with socialism, right? If you believe that it is unethical to hire what you consider to be wage slaves, which is a traditionally run business where you just pay a wage to a worker, where you extract the excess capital off the top, you cannot participate in that structure of business given your knowledge base without knowingly perpetuating an unethical system, right? You can't do that. Whereas me as a capitalist who I do not believe that to be the case. I think you can run a traditionally run business and be perfectly fine. It's not inherently unethical. Then yeah, I'm cool with that. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, who cares? Do that shit if you want to. You can be an asshole while doing it, but yeah, you could do that. Go for it. And I can run a business that way if I wish. So yeah. But what if you're a black kid that says the N-word? Well, then you've got yourself a little something called the pass, okay?